Charlie woke up to a commotion in the camp. John brought an unconscious Claire and handed her to Jack, who immediately began to give her first aid. Finally, the girl came to her senses and screamed, completely disoriented. She did not recognize any of the passengers. After calming down a bit, Claire said she didn't remember any Ethan and them either. Her last memory is of being on a plane. Jack told the girl about the plane crash that had happened a month earlier. Jean reasoned out loud about what was going on. Sun lied that she didn't understand anything either. Boone asked Locke where Ethan might have been hiding Claire all this time because they had combed the jungle and found no one. Meanwhile, Charlie handed Claire her personal diary, hoping it would help her retrieve her memories. Claire guesses that he and Charlie were friends. The guy recalls how he and his buddy Tommy used to use substances, but to get money for new doses, you need work. At the bar, Tommy tells Charlie about an unsympathetic girl named Lucy, who is the daughter of a rich father. The guys sit down with a group of girls, and Charlie begins to flirt with them. In the present, Saeed expresses doubts about Claire's amnesia, but Charlie doesn't believe she could be in cahoots with Ethan. In the jungle, Charlie meets Jean. At one point, they hear suspicious noises, and a rock comes flying at Jean. The Korean lost consciousness, and Charlie was horrified to see Ethan coming at him, demanding Claire's return. Charlie lunged at his foe, but he was stronger. He ordered that Claire be brought to him as soon as possible, or one man would die every day. At the beach, Charlie tells what happened. Jack offers to hunt Ethan down, but John thinks it makes more sense to do otherwise. Jean is very concerned that he doesn't understand what's going on around him, and meanwhile Claire tells Charlie that everyone is avoiding her. Claire also tries to unobtrusively find out if the passengers are preparing an attack on Ethan. Charlie slips back into the memories. Lucy takes him to her house. There are a lot of expensive things here, which Lucy's rich father collects. The girl promises to introduce Charlie to him soon. Kate says it might be a good time to open the case and pull out the 4 guns, but Jack is adamantly against it because the guns might end up in unreliable hands. Locke prepared traps, and Saeed lit fires every 20 meters. At night they would have to take turns on watch. Charlie still feels guilty about Claire, but Jack assures him that they won't let Claire be kidnapped a second time. Charlie recalls having dinner with Lucy and her father. To the man, Charlie seemed like a very interesting, creative person. The guy admitted that he would probably have to give up music because he had no money. Later at the bar, Charlie tells his buddy that he has been hired by a photocopier firm. Tommy resented Charlie for refusing to carry out his part of the plan, since he was supposed to steal something of value from the house. But Charlie wanted to start thinking about the future, because Liam probably won't be back in their music group. During the night, a few men remained on watch at the fires. Boone dozed off, waking only in the morning when the trap went off. Boone rushed out into the jungle, someone rustling around, but it turned out to be Vincent. Suddenly there were screams. On the beach, the company found Scott with no signs of life. No one knew how Ethan had managed to sneak onto the beach without being trapped. Scott was buried. Hugo gave a speech. In the caves, everyone still looks at Claire with suspicion. The girl asked Shannon what was going on. After this conversation, Claire asked Charlie why he hadn't told her about the defense. Charlie recalls how Lucy bought him an expensive suit for his first day at work. The guy feels very bad, because he hasn't used substances in days. When Lucy was away, he stole an expensive cigarette case. Obviously, if they don't give Claire back to Ethan, someone else will be dead in 24 hours. Then Jack decides to take extreme measures and shows John the gun case. Jack trusts Locke and gives him the gun. A plan was devised that Charlie didn't like, because Claire would have to act as bait. But the girl decided to take the plunge, because she didn't want anyone else to get hurt. Charlie recalls speaking in front of potential photocopier buyers. His hands were shaking because of withdrawal syndrome and he was sweating all over himself. At one point he threw up in front of everyone. Jack and John decided to give the 4th gun to Sawyer, since he is one of the few people who can shoot. Sawyer had a gun, too, the same one that was taken from the bailiff. It went to Kate. Saeed, meanwhile, was giving everyone instructions. They were counting on capturing Ethan alive to get information. Charlie doesn't like that they're not taking him with them. Claire wanders through the jungle in the rain, while the others sit in ambush. Soon Ethan shows up and chases Claire, but he is intercepted by Jack, who drops his gun. A fight ensued, during which the enemy was neutralized. Suddenly Charlie took Ethan's life with Jack's gun. Morning came. Jack asked Charlie why he did it, because now they could learn nothing about the island. However, Charlie considers that Ethan deserved it. The guy remembered knocking on Lucy's door. The girl opened the door and asked him to leave. She learned that he had stolen the cigarette case and had been lying to her the whole time. One thing Lucy didn't understand was why Charlie had gone to work in the first place. The guy admitted that he wanted to change his life, but he screwed up. In the present, Claire approached Charlie and said she was scared and needed someone she could trust. In the next scene, we see a woman hiding her young son while her furious husband knocks on the door. Lying under the bed, the boy listens helplessly as his father fights with his mother. Suddenly everything is quiet and the door to the room opens. Not finding his son, the man sat down on the bed and took his own life with a shot. In the present, Sawyer awoke from a nightmare. A wild boar was searching for food nearby, and Sawyer chased it into the jungle. There he heard a strange whisper. It was as if someone was trying to tell Sawyer that he would soon get what he deserved. In the afternoon he was sorting through his scattered belongings, for the boar had stolen the canopy. Saeed gloated. Sawyer responded sarcastically, too. But then he asked Saeed what he had heard in the jungle when he ran away from the Frenchwoman. Saeed confessed that he heard some whispering. Sawyer recalls having fun with a mistress. However, Hips, an old acquaintance of his, happens to be in the room. When the confused girl leaves, Sawyer punches Hips, advising him not to follow him anymore. But suddenly Hips claimed to know the address of the man who had once broken Sawyer's life. A certain Mr. Frank Duckett, who used to be called Sawyer. He now lives in Sydney. Jack hid the pistols again, but there was one missing from the case. Sawyer didn't want to give up his gun. Kate promised she'd get it back. Meanwhile, Claire suggested that Charlie go for a walk, but he said he was busy for now. Sawyer found the canopy in the jungle, but as he was returning, he heard whispers again, and then the boar chased him. Sawyer threw the canopy, and the animal knocked him right into a puddle. Kate amused herself by watching Sawyer, who would not rest until he had killed that boar. For him, it was a matter of principle. Going off into the jungle, Sawyer recalls in Sydney coming to a companion and receiving a pistol with bursting bullets from him. Sawyer thinks he won't hesitate to pull the trigger. Meanwhile, Hugo helps Charlie bury Ethan. Noticing his friend's condition, he later decides to ask Saeed if he had post-traumatic stress disorder after the war. Hugo thinks Saeed should talk to Charlie. Kate caught up with Sawyer in the jungle. She offered to help him hunt a boar, and in return she could take anything from his stash. By nightfall they had built a fire. Sawyer had alcohol stashed away. He suggested play a game to get to know each other better. During the game, Sawyer learned that Kate hadn't been married long at all. She also had more than one death on her conscience. Sawyer remembers that nightmare night over and over again. In the morning Kate woke him up. The camp had been ransacked. The boar had destroyed all Sawyer's belongings, but Kate's backpack was untouched. Suddenly John Locke came out of the bushes, and Kate told him about the war the boar had declared on Sawyer. Somehow John sensed that Sawyer was tormented with guilt. Perhaps with this boar, the island was trying to tell him something. Sawyer recalls coming to see Frank Duckett, who now works at the stall. He could finally look into the eyes of the man who had broken his life. When Frank is distracted, Sawyer discreetly pulls out a gun, identifying himself as James. He was never able to shoot and fled, and in the evening he got drunk in a bar. There he was spoken to by Mr. Shepherd, who had also flown to Sydney not long ago. Mr. Shepherd told how he lost his medical license and with it the meaning of life. He also talked about his son Jack, who is unlike him and always acts according to his conscience. Mr. Shepherd doesn't blame Jack, considering him a great man. When Sawyer confessed that he had unfinished business in Australia that might ease his anguish, Shepherd advised him to act now, or he would regret the rest of his life. Without thinking twice, Sawyer set out to put his plan into action. Saeed approached Charlie for a heart-to-heart talk and advised the guy not to pretend he wasn't sorry. Kate and Sawyer continued wandering through the jungle. Suddenly a grunt was heard in the bushes, and Sawyer found a little piglet. Kate didn't like the fact that Sawyer was trying to use the cub to bait an adult boar, so she left. Sawyer recalls coming to Frank and shooting him, and then beginning to read that very letter. But almost at once Sawyer realized that Heap had deceived him. The man was no Sawyer, but a former foe of Heap's. In the present, Sawyer caught up with the boar and pulled out a gun as Kate watched. He did put the gun down, saying it was just a boar, nothing more. Charlie went up to Claire and asked her out for a walk. Sawyer meanwhile paid Jack a visit and gave him the gun. Suddenly Jack uttered the very phrase the older man at the bar had said. After a few questions, Sawyer realized that he was talking to Jack's father at the time. Please subscribe to the channel.